All right, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Before we get started with everything this evening, I want to go to the crowd that we have tonight to see as if there are any news and notes on any projects or research that anyone is working on in their spare time. Nobody has any spare time. All right. Here we go. Well, beginning this year, all SABR members exclusively receive the Baseball Research Journal electronically twice a year. The fall issue will be emailed in early November. However, if you're interested in a paperback copy for your personal library, we've rolled out a subscription option at a significantly discounted rate, only $7 per issue for members. To subscribe and receive a printed edition of the Baseball Research Journal, visit sabr.org/subscribe today. All right. On to our feature presentation. Like many American boys, Tony Barnette yearned to one day make it to the show, playing baseball professionally. The Arizona State pitcher was drafted in 2006 by the Diamondbacks. Gradually ascending the minor league ladder, it looked like this was the beginning of a blessed life where he could play the game he loved on the grandest of stages in front of family and friends. But things don't always work out the way we want now, do they? On the verge of achieving his lifelong dream after notching a league-high 14 wins in AAA, Tony looked ahead to 2010 with optimism. That's when Japan came calling, offering a significant salary hike in exchange for foregoing a likely forthcoming big league debut. Loren Fischman is a sports writer, editor, and multimedia journalist who hosts the On the NBA podcast, a weekly interview show he co-founded with fellow USC alums Loren Lee Chen and brother Joshua Fischman in advance of the 2015-2016 NBA season. He is the author of the new book, A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. And he is here tonight to discuss that book with all of us. Loren Fischman, welcome to Northern New England, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for that spirited introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I got to say that I'm happy that you're pinch hitting for us at the last minute. I know this has been kind of a frenzied weekend of putting all of this together. So I just want to take a moment to tell you how much I appreciate you pinch hitting for us. Our initial presenter had a death in the family, couldn't make it this
Sorry
evening.
to hear that.
Wish him all the best. And we're happy you're here. So let's get started here. Tell us a little bit about how this book came to be, would you?
So, if you don't mind, could we talk a little bit more after I read the prologue?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Let's do that. So
Yeah, it's a
what
little bit
area?
non-traditional. Just kind of just throw you all into the fire without much context, but I think that should be good, and then we'll talk a little bit more.
So Loren is going to read the prologue to his book. It's about a 5-minute, 6-minute passage, and I'm just going to step back and let him go. So Loren, you're on.
Before I do that, though, I just want to say my dad is from Keene, New Hampshire. If anyone knows much about Keene,
Yep.
that's my special connection with this chapter and the broader area. He moved when he was 5, so didn't spend a lot of time in New England, but he's a lifelong Red Sox, Patriots, and um, Bruins. Not really hockey as much, but especially Red Sox, Celtics, and Patriots fan. So I am too. Also Dodgers and Clippers, but anyway, so there's a little fun fact about me and my connections in New England. Do we have
You're up.
anyone from Keene or nearby?
No, I don't think we have anybody. I'm close to Keene in New London, and
Oh, well,
when I say close, I'm like, well, I think about an hour or so.
that's not that far.
There's real no direct way. You can't get there from here. You just can't get there from here. But we attract actually from all around the country and into Canada as well. So you've got
Okay.
folks from all around the country here tonight.
Okay, cool. Um, I don't know if we want to start sharing the slides or not, but there is one that has the excerpts on it.
However
I
you
don't
want
know
to
if it
do.
hmm, if you'd like, you can put just put the second slide up.
All right. So what you're going to do is go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the share button again.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I had to do it again.
Yeah, this is going to be you. And
Okay.
then you're going to share your PowerPoint.
And then I'll
And then
just
you hit
control which
slideshow
one.
or hit
Okay.
play from start. Up top left, play from start. Or choose the slide that you want.
Sorry about this.
I see it. I'm just waiting.
Slideshow. Okay. So you all see the first slide, right?
You sure do.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So this is the cover. I'll go back to this in a second, but I'm just gonna run through some slides to get to the excerpts. I don't know exactly where to. Okay. So, these will be the 6 excerpts that I'm going to read, and I'm just going to do the first one for now before I talk more with Bruce. And this one is about 6.5 minutes. So thanks for bearing with me. I'm excited to read this as a hook into the story. Okay. The 11-hour flight from Los Angeles has arrived at its destination, Tony Barnett's new home. As the 6'1" white man with long black hair steps off the plane and into Tokyo's Narita International Airport, the cameras begin flashing. The Japanese media are waiting specifically for him and a couple fellow American pitching imports. It's an awfully novel feeling for a man who was largely anonymous the previous season in AAA with the Arizona Diamondbacks Reno Aces. Born in Alaska before spending the bulk of his childhood in a suburb of Seattle, Washington, the 26-year-old is certainly no seasoned international traveler. It's his first trip outside North America, let alone to Asia. There's no translator yet, but greetings and questions fly at him in Japanese and broken English. He smiles, taking in as much of the scene as he can. Trying to avoid doing anything stupid, he's frozen in the moment. He goes through customs, where the official stamps his passport and collects his embarkation card. After retrieving his 3 stand-up suitcases, he'll be living out of those for the foreseeable future, and loading them onto a cart, he continues through a set of doors. A slim man with short black hair and long sideburns named Go Fujisawa is holding a sign that says Mr. Barnett. Also 26, Go will become Tony's lifeline in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Educated at Indiana State University, he's a Japanese English interpreter employed by the Tokyo Yakult Swallows to work with the team's English-speaking pitchers. After a brief second stop to speak with media members, they're off to the hotel in Tokyo. Meanwhile, in Arizona, where it's still morning, 16 hours behind Japan time, Tony's girlfriend, Hillary Jones, has just gotten to work at her marketing job. She runs her first Google search in Japanese and sees a number of airport arrival photos. Initially, she thinks the media throng must be mistaking him for someone else. They are not. When she returns home, she is thoroughly amused by the Spunichi Annex's treatment of her boyfriend in its morning newspaper. 2 pictures accompany an article. A large photo of Tony wearing a standard white hashimaki while holding a rice ball in one hand and a baseball in the other, as well as a smaller photo of him walking into the airport terminal. On the right side of the story, a math equation appears, declaring Tony a cross between actors Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves, followed by the word ikimen, which is a newish term that translates to good-looking guy or metrosexual. Clearly, the Japanese media have a unique way of welcoming foreign players. 5,800 miles away, but for all intents and purposes a world away, he begins to get to know his translator. Within days, thanks to Go's apparent omnipresence, Tony likens him to a shadow. As he would later explain, the guy was just on me at all times, making sure that I knew everywhere I needed to be, when I needed to be there, and what I needed for that situation. During the car ride to the hotel, Go starts to describe what Tony will need to know over the coming days and beyond. Following a brief stop to unload luggage, The duo braved the Tokyo evening rush hour, allowing for Tony's first exposure to the city's internationally renowned transportation system. The train is so packed that neither man can move more than a few inches in any direction. They're on their way to meet new teammate Jamie D'Antona, who happened to play in the Diamondbacks organization while Tony did. Although the two never shared a clubhouse, they have previously met and are familiar with each other. The Swallows' lead interpreter and Go's immediate superior, Koji Kondo, has arranged reservations for the party of three at a nice yakiniku restaurant. Tony's first experience with yakiniku, which translates to grilled meat and bears strong resemblance to Korean barbecue, is love at first sight. The conversation is a success too, flowing freely among new friends. D'Antona had played for Yakult the previous season, so he's able to enlighten Tony on the team, Nippon Professional Baseball, NPB, and the Japanese experience more broadly. After dinner, Go leaves the Americans, who take comfort in each other's camaraderie as they stroll the streets. After a marathon of a day, sleep is calling Tony's name. When he wakes up the next morning, it will be January 27th, 2010, with spring training scheduled to start in 5 days. From Tokyo, the team will fly to Okinawa, the fifth largest Japanese island, located approximately 400 miles south of mainland Japan. Without snow and boasting warmer winter temperatures than the other prefectures, Okinawa is an ideal training spot. There, Tony will debut as the Swallows' newest foreigner. By rule, each NPB team is permitted to field a maximum of only 4 foreigners, known in Japan as Gaijin, including no more than 3 position players or 3 pitchers on its active top team roster at any time. To open camp, he will be the only newbie among the foreigners, joining Korean closer Chang-Yong Lim, Canadian outfielder Aaron Guile, who played 5 seasons with the Royals and Yankees, and the aforementioned American first baseman D'Antona. He has to remind himself the whirlwind of the past 24 hours did indeed occur, as surreal as it seemed. Just a few months earlier, at his family's Thanksgiving dinner in Washington, Tony would never have guessed that he'd be playing baseball in Asia the following season. Then, his big league dreams felt so close to being achieved. Those hopes would have to be placed on the back burner, hidden away for now. Rather, it was time to tackle the challenge of the present, surviving and thriving in a strange foreign land. In his bed in Tokyo, Tony closes his eyes and instantly falls asleep. And before I kick it to you, Bruce, that chapter there, that prologue is called Tom Cruise plus Keanu Reeves divided by 2. That's the name of it.
But what's the answer to the equation?
Tony Barnette.
I
He's a
I'm a
cross
math
between.
guy. My first degree is math. There's always an answer.
The answer is Tony Barnette.
There you go. The answer is Tony Barnette. So
Yeah.
let's start with a little bit about how you came across this story.
So
Go ahead.
it's a weird coincidence how I came into contact with Tony in the first place. So I was an undergrad at UC Davis near Sacramento, California, and I was writing for a small independent website, and he was one of a handful of AA pitchers I reached out to. And I didn't know anything about his bio other than he logged a lot of innings, had a good K to walk ratio, and he was the only person to respond and agree to be interviewed. This was in, I would say, the early days of social media, at least early days of Facebook. I feel like people were less guarded about doing media interviews then, but also he was basically an anonymous minor leaguer. So he was happy to do it. We started with a transcript interview where I just typed something like 12 questions, sent it to him in a message on Facebook. He got back to me in a few days. Then we graduated to him writing blog entries for us. But at that time, he was a AA pitcher. He was really charismatic and engaging, but other than that, there was nothing particularly fascinating about his story. And as we kept in touch, his story got progressively more and more interesting until 2016. That was when, as fascinating as his Japanese journey I thought was in and of itself, I didn't think I could get a book deal in North America, or that it would be marketable here until he got that major league contract, which was his lifelong dream. And that finally happened in late 2015. So that was when I reached out to him early 2016 about his to gauge his interest in turning it into a book. And he didn't think he was worthy, or that his story was particularly noteworthy, kind of imposter syndrome type stuff. And I had to convince him a little bit. But I didn't have to do that much convincing. It was more of just like a humble, like, really, me? You want to make a book about me? And I told him I did, and why I think it could be interesting and enlightening for people, and he was enthusiastically on board after that. That's a little bit of a long answer to that question.
You actually stole my thunder for my next question. I was going to ask you
Sorry about
about Tony's reaction to you saying, "Hey, I want to write a book about you." I don't think I could imagine anybody saying, "So you're going to your subject, hey, I want to write a book about you," and him saying, "Yeah, heck yeah, it's about darn time somebody came up to me and said, I want to put you on in Barnes and Noble."
that.
Describe that. Did he really come from a place of humility? Did he come from a place of bewilderment? Like, why would you want to write about me? Where do you really think his mind was in that?
So definitely there was some humility involved. He's always been supremely confident of his abilities and his achievements. It's just I did a lot of cool, good, important things, but so did a lot of other people. He didn't necessarily think that his story stood out at the time. And also he has this, I would say, duality to him. And I think a lot of people are like this, probably a lot of public figures, where, and I think it's a pretty human thing to want public attention and approval for your accomplishments, but then he also doesn't love being the center of attention at times also. For instance, he doesn't have a Twitter or X account anymore. He did for a while. So he also didn't necessarily want so much attention thrust upon him all of a sudden at first. So that was one thing that made him a little bit wary at first, because it's not just about the baseball and on the field stuff. There's a lot of information and insight into his personal life. And so that was also one thing that I think was going around in his mind when I approached him about that. We had been pretty close though by that time, and one thing I didn't say was in the intervening years between, so I had known him for a long time. 2008 was my first outreach. So he was writing blog entries for us. He wrote a blog entry about going to spring camp for the Diamondbacks when he was going to start his AAA season. Um, and then he even blogged that second year in Japan for us a few days after the earthquake and tsunami, which we'll talk about. And that was really special to have him write that for us and give us that firsthand account of what an American professional baseball player was going through in Japan during that the Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. But it was one of those things where we developed rapport over time. We became friendly. I don't know if friends is the right word, but friendly. We started to trust each other a lot more over time. And for a while, I had not been publishing, other than the blog entries and some interviews that I did. I wrote a couple stories for various grad school projects, and they were just never published. So I was able to accumulate more information too from him. And for the grad school projects, I was able to start interviewing other people. So it wasn't just Tony that I had access to, but and his wife, but his teammates, his interpreter, former coaches and teammates. And so it was a much more full story and picture that I was providing once I was able to work on those projects for grad school. So it wasn't like I was just staring at a blank page when I started that daunting project of turning it into a book.
How long does this project take you?
It depends how you measure it. You could even say that it started in 2008, but um, I'm gonna say just to make myself feel a little bit better, and it's still really long, but I'm gonna say that um, the spring of 2016 is when I started turning it into a book at least, and it wasn't published until June of this year, 2024. So. Um, like 8.5 years. That's a little misleading because some of that process is reaching out to prospective agents and publishers, and it's not only reporting and researching and writing during that time. But yeah, from start to finish, I'll go with 8.5 years.
You fit this in with a day job too, right?
A lot. So some of the time I had a full-time job, and I didn't the entire time though. So yeah.
I mean, there is a nasty addiction to food and shelter that most of us have that, we've got to find monetary remuneration somewhere. So I can see where it would have to be put on the back burner once in
Yeah.
a while. But let's shift gears for a second here. We've got a little bit of the introduction to the book, but I'd like to find out a little bit more about Loren Fischman. Tell me about how you got started in media and your podcast and writing and such.
So I've always been really fascinated by sports and storytelling really for a while. I collected baseball cards. I was going to Clippers and NBA games, USC football, basketball and baseball games, Dodgers games from a really young age, probably four, starting from as early as I could remember, even before then. But um, I started to read sports biographies and political biographies, but just a lot of biographies, mostly sports books, when I was in high school. And it sounds arrogant, and I knew I knew I could do it one day. I wasn't foolish enough to believe that at that time, without any formal training, um, or more life experience, that I could do it at that point. But I felt like this is definitely something that I would be capable of doing ultimately. And there was no journalism major at Davis, but I did radio there, and I hosted a podcast. So I was interviewing people, student athletes, talking sports, also interviewing national figures, journalists and athletes, and announcing games. But I went to grad school to formally study journalism, and that's where I learned a lot more about reporting and researching and storytelling in different mediums, and so that's kind of like the early background of how I got started.
Well, speaking of storytelling, I think we've set you up well enough here. Why don't I just step aside and let you tell your story?
I have a technical question. I'm not sure if you know the answer.
Go ahead. You're
So
okay.
the screen sharing that I'm doing, do you know
Mm-hmm.
if I can have it not be on the full screen so that I
No,
can look at another document?
no, you've
He can. He can.
okay.
Sorry for jumping in, honey. So Aaron, tell me what you want to do. Are you trying to look at your slides like this right here, what you're showing me?
I actually don't want to look at slides. Or I want to be able to look at the slides and another window at
And
the
another
same time.
window. So you can't share the other window with us, but you can click and look at that window yourself, and this will still share the slides to
That's a good
us.
point. Yes.
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Sure, no problem, Aaron. So you can open a separate window and
Hmm.
open whatever document you need. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll still have the Zoom open, and Zoom will only share what you're sharing. So we'll only see your slide. The other document will not be shared with us.
Okay. It was just that it was full screen for me. Just
Yeah, it's not full
sorry.
screen anymore for us. So it shouldn't be full screen for you anymore.
Okay. Okay.
So you should be able to open another window and look at whatever document you need.
Okay. I'm just trying to get organized. Thanks for bearing
It's
with me.
not a problem. I had a very quick learning curve when COVID happened and I had to teach on 2
Right.
computers.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We
So
are
so you
A-okay.
so you are seeing the
I see
So-
your presentation. Yes.
So
okay.
we're seeing the presentation in what's called the draft mode where you can edit it right now, Aaron.
Oh, okay.
And that's okay.
How do I get it back to the
To the present, so upper
presentation
left,
mode?
yeah, sure, no problem. Upper left-hand side,
Hmm.
under the draw function, there's presenter mode right there.
Where? Oh.
Upper left-hand side.
Oh, I have to go into this is not in Zoom? Is this in
So
sorry,
you should be in your
PowerPoint, right?
PowerPoint, correct. And in your PowerPoint, you can put it in presenter mode, which is, yep, there you go. Oh, you missed it. Go back to the left, please.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the left. More, please. More and down. Nope. Down. Oh, over to the right.
Oh, okay.
There you
There
go.
it is. There you
I
go.
just don't okay, I just don't want it full screen.
Unfortunately,
So-
that's the way it's gonna.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's
Yep.
gonna fill your screen if you put it in present mode.
Okay.
So a lot of presenters, Aaron, honestly have done it in this edit mode
Yep, you're
and
perfect.
have done it this way.
So you're seeing the slide right now?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're seeing
No
the slide,
trouble.
and people have
Okay.
done this quite often like this.
It's big enough though and everything.
Yeah.
People can
Yep.
see. Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna try to start getting going now. Thank you for that.
All right,
I
take a
really
breath. You're
appreciate the
fine.
help.
You are perfect
Thank you.
here. This is a safe space for everybody.
Thank you. So Bruce read the synopsis, but and that was from Amazon, and this is just basically like a one sentence explanation of what the book is. An inspiring, culture-heavy story centered around American pitcher Tony Barnette's exhilarating, life-changing 6-year journey to and through Tokyo in pursuit of his lifelong dream to pitch in the major leagues, which he ultimately achieves at 32 years old with the Texas Rangers. Really long sentence, but tried to pack a lot in there. And so just talking more about that and kind of touching on the point that I a little bit alluded to, that Tony thought, wait, how am I special? Why are you centering this book around me? So this is why, in my opinion. So he'd go on to pitch 3 strong seasons with the Texas Rangers, also log a little bit of time with the Chicago Cubs in that 4th and final MLB season before he ended his playing career. And now he's actually a scout with that Japanese team, the Yakult Swallows, based in Arizona. So it's come full circle, and I'll talk about that at the end. But in so doing, he ushered in a new era of pitchers who are increasingly following a similar formula, whereas traditionally, Japanese players, pitchers and position players, would go to Japan in the twilight of their career when they were on the older side, just to make one or two, squeeze out 1 or 2 more contracts, just make a little bit more money. And or they would just go to Japan earlier in their careers and never get back. They were just seen as a fringe player, MLB player, and they would just never really get the opportunity to come back. They either weren't that good, or there weren't as many scouts in Japan looking for young American or other foreign players who went to Japan. You had to pretty much just flat out dominate in Japan to be able to come back, especially if you had gone there without any major league experience. Every once in a while over the years, there would be a guy like Colby Lewis or Ryan Vogelsong who used NPB to boomerang back to the majors, but they had had some prior major league experience. And then they went to Japan, really improved their craft, and came back a much better pitcher. Both of those guys I mentioned went to multiple World Series soon after returning from Japan. Colby Lewis with the Rangers and Ryan Vogelsong with the Giants. But that was more the exception than the rule. And also they had some prior major league experience, which Tony did not. But now, ever since Tony did it, it's become more commonplace to see pitchers with no prior MLB experience go to Japan in their primes, perfect their games there, and ultimately be able to forge a solid MLB career. So now going to the next slide, Robert Suarez has followed that formula that Tony Barnette really made more popular. Boasting zero experience, he went to Japan. So he's now the San Diego Padres closer, made the All-Stars this year, Venezuelan right-hander. He played in Japan for a while. He had an arm injury while he was there, but he spent 2016 through 19 with the SoftBank Hawks, and then he was the Hanshin Tigers closer in 2020 and 2021. Tony made his major league debut at 32 years old, Robert Suarez at 31. They have different stuff. I'm not comparing their stuff or their pitching repertoire or anything else really about them other than the formula that brought Robert Suarez to the major leagues, and he's having so much success now in San Diego. There are a couple other pitchers I want to highlight, and they did go to NPB with a little bit of experience. One of them is Robert Suarez's slightly older brother, Albert Suarez. He's about a year and a half older. He's now back in the major leagues with the Orioles, but he spent a couple seasons with the Giants, San Francisco Giants, and was not that great. Then was in AAA the following season, went to the Yakult Swallows for 3 seasons. That's the team that Tony Barnette played for 6 years. Perfected his craft. Did spend a couple more seasons in Korea in the KBO, and now he's back in 2024 in the major leagues with the Baltimore Orioles. Came back at 34 years old. So another Gaijin, foreign player, non-Japanese player who used that experience in Japan to just get better, tinker with things, develop new pitches, learn from the coaches there and the teammates there, and just get better, and then come back a far improved pitcher. And then also Nick Martinez, and I'm highlighting him partially because he was Tony Barnette's teammate with the Rangers in 2016 and 17. He then left for Japan after that final Ranger season, and again, like I've been saying, significantly improved his game there. And I'll go back to the other slide. So I have ERA plus, just to highlight the kind of pitcher Albert Suarez was when he was in the major leagues before the Japanese experience and then after. And so what 91 means for ERA plus is essentially that he was about 9% worse than the average MLB pitcher, according to that metric, which adjusts for various things. And then when he came back, and that's over those 2 seasons, 2016 and 17. And then this season, since he's been back, he's largely been a starter for the Orioles, and he's been about 11% better than the average MLB pitcher this season. And similar story for Nick Martinez, actually more of an improvement. Over those 4 seasons with the Rangers, he was 9% worse than the average MLB pitcher. And in the 3 seasons since he's been back, he spent 2 with the Padres and is a Cincinnati Red this year. He's been 21% better than the average major league pitcher. And I thought it was interesting too that he was teammates with Tony for those 2 years. And that was, of course, after Tony's 6 years in Japan. And then he followed a similar formula, even though he had been in the majors for some years before going to Japan. One thing I wanted to ask if anyone, I was just curious if anyone saw this, that Shota Imanaga and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, both pitchers fresh off their NPB careers, they're both rookies in the major leagues, started against each other last Tuesday at Dodger Stadium. Not sure if anyone saw this. So here's more about it. So Imanaga was a member of the Yokohama DNA Bay Stars. Yoshinobu Yamamoto pitched for the Oryx Buffaloes. And so Shota Imanaga has had a tremendous rookie season. As I assume all of you saw, he pitched a combined no-hitter along with Nathan Pearson and Porter Hodge. That was his previous start before the one at Dodger Stadium. And I'll have a couple of fun facts about that in a second. But so that was his first start on the heels of that combined no-hitter. And Yamamoto, that was his first start in nearly 3 months upon returning from a right shoulder injury. So it was just cool how the stars aligned to have both of them start against each other at Dodger Stadium. Of course, Shohei Ohtani, likely NL MVP at this point, in my opinion. He starred in Japan for a while, superstar two-way player, and it is in his first season with the Dodgers as well. And Seiya Suzuki also on the Cubs, good Japanese player. But so I thought it was pretty cool that they started against each other. I didn't get to go to the game. My dad did go. But Yamamoto looked terrific from the very start. He was on a pitch count just out of an abundance of caution because he was returning from that shoulder injury. But he did really well in 4 innings and 59 pitches. Imanaga ultimately got the win, going 7 strong innings. He gave up 7 hits and 3 runs, but they were all solo home runs, 2 to Tommy Edman, and both on first pitch fastballs to Tommy Edman, and then also a solo home run by Max Muncy. So this is kind of tangential to my story and a little bit of a side note. I just thought it was interesting that they started against each other, and Yamamoto started the game in an exciting way too. He struck out the side in the top of the first, and he ended the inning actually getting his countryman Seiya Suzuki. He caught him looking on. Let me see what pitch that was. Sorry about that. He missed with a curveball on a 2-2 count, and then on the payoff pitch, he painted the low and outside corner to freeze Suzuki. So he struck out the side in his first major league action in nearly 3 months. So I thought that was pretty cool. A couple of fun facts about that combined no-hitter. This was widely reported, so you may have heard it, but I just thought it was interesting that it was the first combined no-hitter in MLB history to have a rookie start and finish it. Nathan Hodge was the starter, or sorry, Porter Hodge was the other rookie. And then the other weird fun fact that I have was that each of Imanaga's last 2 starts, the no-hitter against Pittsburgh and then that win in LA, he threw 7 innings. Pearson pitched the 8th and Hodge pitched the 9th. So it was the exact same order and pitchers who threw for the Cubs in those games. So I'm gonna move on and try to be a little bit more efficient.
Don't worry, Aaron. We got some questions for you tonight, my friend.
Sounds good. I look forward to those. Okay, so now, right now it's showing the excerpts. I'm going to read two of those right now. So the second one on there is looking at the backstory of Tony's interpreter for 5 of the 6 seasons that he spent in Japan. His name's Go Fujisawa. And I don't know if anyone has the book. It's on page 38 for anyone following along. I know they want to be understood, said Go Fujisawa of the Gaijin he assisted. I know they want us to understand them. Even if they look like they're doing well, they should have something they're concerned about, and to find that thing is my job. He was born on May 2nd, 1983, in Tazawako, a small, quiet city in the mountainous prefecture of Akita. Go's parents, a banker mom and a father who worked as a public officer in Tazawako's city hall, let him and his older brother roam free. I was kind of wild, said Go with a laugh, fully conscious of his buttoned-up professional persona. With his friends, he would often head to Japan's deepest lake, Lake Tozawa, where they'd play and explore. Other times he swam at a nearby river while his dad and brother tried to catch fish. He played baseball and was a pretty good pitcher by his account. While many of his peers dreamed of playing professionally, he aspired to play for the national team. It was a kid's dream, said Go, so he never fleshed out exactly what he'd do for work. He just knew that members of the national team had to be amateurs and thus could not play baseball for a living. I didn't really know about jobs. There wasn't much around me. It was a really small town. He felt he had only 3 choices, to be either of his parents' professions or maybe a baseball player, since he had so much fun playing. But Go wasn't just physically active. He was a thinker, too, voraciously reading a wide variety of comic books and novels as long as they were in Japanese. Young Go never read in English, although in junior high he was taught the language 3 hours each week. I'd say I've never enjoyed studying English, said the Japanese English interpreter, dead serious. And before I read the next excerpt, I just wanted to say that Go, it was so invaluable getting access to Go. I spoke with him a number of times for the story. I got to meet him when I visited Tokyo in the spring of 2018. And naturally, because I'm a Westerner, a white Westerner, um, from the US, I told the story from a certain perspective, but I spoke to a lot of Gaijin fellow English speakers, um, who bring that Western perspective, but Go kind of has a toe in both worlds, educated at Indiana State University, but born in rural Japan. And so it was so invaluable getting his insight. And he was just such a nice and accessible guy throughout the process.
Could I springboard off that and ask a question?
Yeah, definitely.
So one of our members here tonight, Ryan McClanahan, had a great question earlier that's I think ties in here. His question was, how are American ball players viewed by their Japanese teammates? Is there a culture shock that they encounter? I would sort of expand that to say, do they integrate with the teams as well as we integrate Japanese players here in the United States? And that's probably a assumption as well. But can you comment to how American ball players are viewed, even through the eyes of an interpreter?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's definitely, as with everything, a case by case basis. So I can't speak generally or for others, but I know from the Gaijin that I spoke with, as well as Go, the interpreter, and others interviewed for the story, that the foreign players who kind of go in not open-minded and are really set in their ways and not as adaptable, have the hardest time fitting in and sticking in Japan. And more specifically, with regard to interactions with players, I talk about it in the book. Go and the senior interpreter Koji Kondo, they would have dinners with the foreign players on the road, and sometimes Nori Aoki, he's a Japanese player, who would tag along to those because he had ambition of playing in the major leagues, which he ultimately did for, I think, at least a handful of years. He was on many teams, Royals, Giants, Astros, etc. But um, so you're definitely closer to not to overly generalize, but in my experience, foreign players are generally closer with fellow foreigners just because there aren't that many of them and they tend to have more in common with each other than they do with the Japanese players. But Tony definitely did get close with some of his Japanese counterparts. And I think one major, other than the cultural differences, the language barrier is a really big thing. But ultimately, baseball players talk baseball, and non-Japanese speakers, they learn enough to get by, at least if you want to not have a brutal time there. And so you learn a lot of the slang and the certain terms that come up more often on the baseball field. So yeah, that's my perspective on it, but it definitely is a learning curve.
Well, that's very interesting that you should say that, because one of our members had a question that kind of springboards along that. I want to go to Gary Joquin for a minute, if you don't mind, Aaron. He's got a couple of very good questions. And his first one that he put in the chat, I'm hoping he can go over with us now. Gary, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Hey, I was just curious about the amount of exposure that Tony Barnette had to Japanese culture before he signed his contract to play over there. Uh, did he have culture shock in the beginning, or was he just of a mind that he immersed himself in Japanese culture enough after he arrived in depth to eventually commit to working as a scout as he does today?
Yeah,
How did that work out for him?
that's a really good question. So it was definitely a journey for him. As I read in the prologue, he had virtually no international travel experience. Um, even in the US, he wasn't really that familiar with Japanese culture, so it was certainly a culture shock. I spoke with Aaron Guile, his longtime teammate, who he did a lot of research before, and there was still so much culture shock. It just, there was no substitute for actually being there. And Aaron Guile has a great quote in the book about how you're in the taxi riding away from the airport, and it finally sinks in that there's an ocean between everyone you know, your family and friends, and you're kind of just all alone. Um, in a sense, even though you do have an interpreter who's with you around the clock, and it's an organization that's very supportive, but it's really scary at first. And Tony felt extremely isolated that first season. It didn't help that he was really struggling on the field. That made everything worse. Um, he Yeah, he was so bad that first season he got demoted multiple times to the farm level, which is called Nigun in Japan, and was released by season's end. He only got that second opportunity out of a fluky sequence of events. A foreign player that they wanted to sign failed his physical, opening up a spot for Tony to get that second chance. But early on, Hillary, his girlfriend, she was still in college at Arizona State, so she wasn't by his side. They had these Skype calls that they had to fit in, but he just felt so alone because he was just going back to his apartment in Tokyo by himself after struggling on the field or in practice. And he ended up becoming closer than friends, that he considered his interpreter family by the end, really starting by like midway through that first season, or year two, the start of year two. But he early on, he was a prideful guy in his mid-20s. He didn't want to ask go for help when he was away from the field. If he was in a supermarket and couldn't identify what type of meat something was, or he couldn't converse with a worker in a store. And so he was just kind of just doing that. I'm not going to ask for directions, stereotypical thing that the guys tend to do, and just struggling. And finally he learned that it's okay. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, but also just by osmosis over time, he just got more comfortable with the language and the culture, and naturally playing better, he wanted to explore more and learn more about the culture. And I have an excerpt about that actually that I'll be reading soon too.
You want me to answer
That, sorry about that.
Second question.
Go. Yeah, I was about to say, you've got a second question that springboards off it just perfectly. Go ahead.
Yeah. How commonplace is it for U.S. players to be scouted by Japanese teams? How many U.S. players are pitching in Japan? Is it unusual for a Japanese team to have more than one U.S. player on their roster or even in their league? And I was just wondering, in general, with the success of Japanese players in the States, like Ichiro, Matsui, Otani, has the number of U.S. players increased significantly in Japan? Are we seeing real cultural exchange?
Well, it hasn't increased significantly, but that's because there's a cap. So each NPB organization on its active top team roster is only allowed 4 players at any one time. And so in that at most 3 pitchers or 3 position players in that 4 cap. But so there are 12 teams, so there can only be 48 at most at any one time, 4 on each active top team roster. But because there are only 4, like I was saying, you get pretty close with your fellow Gaijin teammates. And also expectations are sky high. If you're not, as one of those 4 coveted spots, performing up to expectations, then they'll replace you in a hurry and bring in someone else. So there's no shortage of foreign players that these Japanese teams would like to have. And so the wealthier organizations stockpile sometimes, where they'll add 6, 7, or 8 and have, it's usually more like 4 or 5 or 6. So if someone struggles, you have someone that you can call up quickly. But yeah, so there's no shortage of foreign players, and that's what Tony does now. He identifies going to minor league games based in the West Coast, players that would be most likely to want to take their talents to NPB, which is it's a really good level of play. It's just widely agreed upon that it's a notch below the major leagues and just a little bit above AAA. So somewhere in between, and that's why they call it quadruple A.
So about what percentage of players on a typical Japanese team are non-Japanese nationals?
The roster, it would be probably maybe like 15% about. It would just be about 4 divided by 26 or so.
Okay.
Or 4
So it's fine. It's not
like,
as diverse as a typical MLB team.
Yeah, definitely not. And that has to do with cultural reasons. And for a long time there was a Japanese baseball protectionism that it would be kind of a long story to go into, but it's featured in the book, where records that were held by Japanese players were they were so tightly protected that if a non-Japanese player was threatening to break Sadaharu O's long-standing single season home run record, for instance, they would be pitched around. And that happened in the 80s with Randy Bass, and in the early 2000s with Alex Cabrera and Tuffy Rhodes. And featured in the book, there's a chapter centered around it. Tony's teammate Vladimir Ballantyne from Curacao, so he was one of their 4 Gaijin in 2013. He ended up breaking Sadaharu O's esteemed record, and so it's changed over time where it's become more of a global perspective, and Ichiro excelling and being welcomed with open arms in the United States was part of that. Also Hideki Matsui and other Japanese players just coming over to the US and their games being televised in Japan has really lessened the protectionism, if you will, in Japan. Matt Merton also broke Ichiro's single season NPB hits record.
Mhm.
And so they weren't pitching around him by that time in 2010.
Can I ask one more question, Bruce?
Go.
What is the Japanese perspective on what I like to call U.S. players showboating, bat flips, no longer containing themselves to the unspoken rules of past generation of players, much more emotionally demonstrative? Are Japanese players more reserved and respectful than U.S. players?
Definitely, I don't want to say yes to that. Yes, I don't want to overly generalize, but to the way you phrased the last question, but
Yeah, I guess I
it's
loaded it up
definitely,
too much.
oh no, it's okay, but it's definitely frowned upon to showboat and call attention to one side. I mean, not to show off in a it's okay to show passion and excitement, but what I talk a lot about in the book and what a lot of people I interviewed have emphasized is they just have a much more collectivistic mindset where
Yeah.
if you're calling attention to yourself, that by definition is detracting from the team and the group harmony or wa as it's called there. And so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
Oh,
yeah, it's
you did at least partially. You gave me some insight. I was expecting a response like that, but to have it affirmed by someone more familiar with the culture is interesting, valuable.
thank you.
Aaron, we've got a couple of more questions from the crowd. Do you mind taking questions?
No, that I don't mind at all.
Let's go to Joe Ross. Joe, could you unmute and ask your question?
I did that. First of
You're
all,
on.
before I even do that, I want to welcome Gus to the telecast. I happened to see him. I have a question about money. Assuming we're not talking about a Shohei or someone who gets paid on that level, if I said, okay, I'm a ball player, I can play Major League Baseball, forgetting the minors because they don't pay enough, would it pay me to play my career in Japan, or should I play my career at the Major League Baseball level, strictly in terms of money?
I'm trying to think of how to answer that. So MLB contracts are higher than NPB contracts, but MLB is also a more difficult level of competition. So it kind of depends the level that you're at. So like for instance, when talking specifically about Tony Barnette, he was in AAA. He was making $2,100 a month. And even though he was on the doorstep of making the major leagues and his salary would have jumped up as soon as the Diamondbacks called him up, he jumped at the opportunity to get a guaranteed $500,000 for someone 20, 25, 26 who had never seen that much money in his life. $500,000 just looked like a dream to him. He was ultimately able to get a really big 2-year, $3.2 million contract with the Swallows. And so he made a good amount of money there. And people can even make foreigners, especially make a lot in Japan, but as well as the homegrown talent there that are really good can make a lot of money in Japan. But there's also the calculus of what's your dream, where do you want to live? So Tony actually took a pay cut, a slight pay cut after his sixth and final 2015 season, after he dominated as the Swallows closer and led them to the Japan series, their equivalent of the World Series. He could have made more. He ended up signing, I believe it was a 2-year, $3.5 million contract with the Rangers. So that's another thing. In the context of today's crazy salaries, you would think $3.5 million or $1.75 million per year is not that much. I mean, to an average person like you and I, it's a lot, but
I'll
he
take it.
took a pay, yeah, he took a pay cut to go back. He would have been paid a lot more if he stayed with the Swallows, because he was a proven commodity at that level of competition at NPB play. But we're seeing Miles Mikolas is a good example on the Cardinals. He pitched for the Rangers, wasn't that great, was another guy who went to Japan and got way better. He pitched for the Yomiuri Giants. He got a decent contract from the St. Louis Cardinals when he returned. But it wasn't that great or eye-popping or anything. But then he proved his worth here. He proved that he has amazing stuff and that he could throw really hard and with a lot of movement and control and command. And so he ended up re-signing with them for 4 years, $64 million. So he just got a huge contract, and that level of contract wouldn't have been available in Japan for him.
Okay, I know the average major league salary today is about $4 million a year. Forgetting the big shots, let's call it 3. Would the average in Japan reach that level for American players?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately. It's I would think it's probably on par, but maybe probably a little bit lower.
So then it really becomes a question of
but
ego. Do I want to say I'm a major league player, or do I want to make a little bit more money? That's the question.
I think ego is part of it, and also just if you just want to be, other than your immediate family who you'll take with you to Tokyo to Japan as a player, if you don't want to be so far away from family and friends and the lifestyle that you're used to. But I mean, it's also which city you're living in. Tokyo is a modern city that has all the amenities that you would need, and it's not like the middle of nowhere or anything. It's not a rural place that's remote, and anything you would want they have there, probably better than in the US in a lot of cases. But yeah, there are a lot of off the field considerations, but ego definitely would be one of them.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
My
So,
pleasure.
Aaron, we're running short on time, and I know that you had an offer for our folks here. I was hoping I could get that in. Could you tell us about you had a slide about today's offer?
Yeah. I wanted to read other excerpts. We probably won't have time. If possible, I'd like to discuss some of them very briefly, or maybe pick one or something. But
Sure. Sure. What I'd like to do is get that offer on the screen for folks, and then feature your face for a little bit on screen. So
it says that it's paused screen sharing.
So if you go to number 13, slide 13 was the one that I was interested in. There you go.
Okay, so thanks for bringing that up. And if anyone would like to get a hardcover copy of the book, I'll be sure to mail you some bookmarks. I don't know if is this showing up, or is it
I'm gonna stop your screen sharing.
Okay.
Maybe.
Actually, it doesn't matter. Maybe wait. You want to just wait?
Now you can share it.
Okay, so these are the bookmarks. If anyone would like a copy, hardcover copy, I'd be honored and happy to send you some bookmarks. If you buy 2 copies, I'm going to be sending you a 3rd copy for free as well as 5 bookmarks. I think it would make for a great gift if you have family or friends, people, like-minded people who would be interested in hearing about this inspirational, culture-heavy story. And then on that slide, it also has some of the places where you can get it online. It's right now only in Barnes and Noble locations in the LA area and Dallas area, Dallas and Arlington, Dallas Fort Worth area. But yeah, it's available online at these sites, and it's the cheapest on Amazon. But
Of course it is.
but IndieBound goes to a good cause, slightly more expensive.
Gary, you had a question. Whoops, sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh no, go.
Gary, yeah, Gary's got his hand up here. Let's go to
I
Gary.
was just thinking it'd be great if you can literally copy the content of that presentation slide with the links to your books, the different venues, into chat. Then we could all get to them faster.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, Ryan. Okay, so Aaron just got it in there. Great, that's terrific. Ryan had a question regarding this. I was just wondering if the teams are owned by corporations making the players employees of the company or just ball players, if that makes sense. So I guess what he's asking is, when Tony went over to Japan, was he employed by the team or the corporation that owned the team?
I don't technically, I don't know the technical
Questions you
answer
get
to
from the
that.
Saber crowd.
That's a really interesting question that I'd love to look into after. But every NPB team is owned by a corporation, as I think maybe Alec asked that. Sorry, I wasn't sure who asked that.
That was Ryan who asked that. Alec
Ryan. So yeah, as Ryan might probably is aware by asking the question, each of the 12 NPB teams are owned by a corporation. So like the Yakult Corporation owns the Tokyo Yakult Swallows, but I don't know if he was technically an employee of the corporation.
Bruce, before you shut it off, one other point. Aaron, you should put this in what you talk about. If it's available in a Barnes and Noble in Los Angeles, every Barnes and Noble in the country can order it for you.
That's true.
You go in and say, I want to buy this book.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I should have said that, and I appreciate that. So Simon & Schuster is the distributor, and that's a good point. So you can go into any Barnes & Noble, just ask for the book, and they'll order it in for you. Thank you for noting that.
I am going to ask you for one more passage before we let everybody go this evening, Aaron. What would be
I think it's
favorite
better.
one? Go ahead.
I appreciate that. And okay, so I will do that. Do you mind if allowing me to just summarize
go right ahead. You do what you need to do, my friend.
Okay, thank you. So obviously is overly ambitious trying to read all these passages, but I really enjoyed the questions. And one thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about, and I'm not going to read this passage. It was on the Women's World Cup soccer team for Japan, inspiring the grieving nation in light of the earthquake and tsunami. But so Tony was there March 11th, 2011. The Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, also referred to as a triple disaster because of the nuclear Fukushima disaster element of it. Only Chernobyl's been a worse nuclear accident in history. So it was just such a devastating event. It was really important for me to spend a couple middle chapters on the book because it's just way more important than baseball. Baseball, I think it's so important, as with a lot of other sports, how it can inspire people, bring people together, provide a welcome distraction during really difficult times. And it did all of that, but I thought it was really important to do that event justice. And so there are a couple middle chapters on that in the book. The first one is more of a micro level, where I'm looking at anecdotes from the ensemble cast to paint a detailed picture of what these people we've come to know are going through. And then the second one takes a step back and is way more on a macro level, discussing things like return to play concerns, where the Giants CEO is trying to rush back to play, to get butts in seats and basically sell tickets. Whereas other people led by the Players Association were saying, we do want to return, but in due time, electricity issues, rolling blackouts, people losing their family members and loved ones, and property is way more important. And so let's not rush back right away. Stadiums were damaged as well. Anyway, so that's one important element I wanted to highlight of the book in the middle. Also, I wanted to highlight Don Nomura's participation in this. He's Tony's agent. He wrote the book's forward. He's the guy known for bringing Hideo Nomo over in the 90s, the first Japanese player to come over to the major leagues in over 30 years. He also brought over Hideki Irabu and Alfonso Soriano, which is discussed in the book, as well as the posting system that he just flat out hates, but he inadvertently helped to create. And so that's all outlined in the book, as well as behind the scenes contract negotiations that he gives insight into concerning him advocating on Tony's behalf. So those, now that I've got those things out of the way, okay, I have a good one.
Okay.
Do you want to say something before I read the last excerpt?
I'm going to go to Molly with the last question for the evening, and then we'll go back to you for the last passage, and then we'll get everybody out. Go ahead, Molly.
I put in the chat, and it might have gotten lost. That's fine in the chat. Aaron, have you always had an interest in Japanese baseball, or did it grow as you followed your friend overseas in his baseball career? Like, how did this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely more of the latter.
Okay.
I mean, I've always been really curious to learn more about things that I didn't know, but there wasn't a specific interest in Japanese baseball before learning about him and his story.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you
You're
for
welcome.
presenting, and don't be nervous. You're a great presenter.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
All right, Aaron, last licks. Go ahead.
Okay. So I have one that I wanted to read, just because it highlights more of the cultural element of it, and when Tokyo really started to feel like home for Tony and Hillary. It's one of my favorite passages in the book. It's on page 137. Obviously, Tony was doing better the second year, and so in terms of a routine, he and I were having a lot more fun exploring the city, said Hillary, reminiscing about a particularly special time of her life. After his games, that's when we would go. The two would take off on their bikes as midnight approached and ride around Tokyo. It was super quiet, she said, and nobody was out really. These late night bike rides helped them get their exercise in a fun and educational way, and they provided Tony golden opportunities to decompress from the stress that comes with professional competition. For many high-level athletes, it's not as simple as flipping a figurative switch to return to normal life. Everybody does it differently, explained Tony. Some guys internalize it, go home, shut everything down. I don't know. You see it in sports. Some guys drink. Some guys go out to nightclubs. You've just got to find what works for you. And that year, that started working. The historic Imperial Palace, located in Chiyoda, Tokyo, was one of his favorite spots to visit on these bicycle trips. Even in rainy weather, they'd excitedly peruse the exterior of Emperor Akihito's primary residence. In addition to the imperial family's private living quarters, the grounds also contain the main palace and archive, museums, and more. The elegant palace, which was built on the site of the old Edo castle, is a grand testament to the world's oldest reigning dynasty, a fact not lost on a marveling Tony. We don't have these things that are so old and so enshrined in history like Japan does, like a lot of the places throughout the world. It's fun to see where people came from, where cultures derive from, and how they used to be ruled. It's history. Bruce, before we close out, I want to say two quick things, if you don't mind. And This was such a pleasure. Thanks so much, guys, for your great questions, for listening, and for your interest in the story, and for having me on. So one of them is, I had a trivia question. I'm just going to say the answer. I assume a lot of you are Red Sox fans. Sorry if I'm wrong about that. But so you probably mostly were aware that Curt Schilling was born in Alaska, or maybe not.
Yep.
So he holds the all-time lead in wins and most other pitching categories of Alaskan-born major leaguers. But Tony Barnette is one of 3 Alaskan-born pitchers to have logged over 100 games in the major leagues.
Oh.
The person who logged more, and the only other all-star other than Curt Schilling, was Sean Chacon. Just kind of random, but he was named to the, I think it was 2003 All-Stars as a member of the Colorado Rockies. Yeah, but random piece of trivia. And then just the last slide that I'm pulling up right now. So I think it's pretty cool that the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown has a copy of this book. They allowed us to donate it, and so that's where it sits right now. And July of 2025, so next summer, the Hall of Fame will have an exhibit about the Trans-Pacific exchange of the game.
Yep.
It's called Yakyu, which means baseball in Japanese. And so I think it's fitting that the book is there. And so that follows both directions: Japanese players coming to the major leagues, and Americans and other foreign players going to NPB to play in Japan. And I also have on there, if you'd like to learn more information about the book, that's my portfolio website. So it has past podcast and radio appearances, and past and upcoming events on there. And also I have my email address on there too. So if anyone wants to take advantage of that offer, then you just contact me and let me know. Just show me that you purchased it, and give me your mailing address, and we'll get going on that.
Aaron's website is aaronfishman.com. You can go and see all his work there. It's a great website, and this is a really, really great book. And Aaron, you've been great this evening. I want to thank you very much for coming out to do this. Now, Wednesday night, this coming Wednesday, 2 days from now, 7 p.m. Eastern, SABR's East Coast Cooperative, a coalition of 6 chapters throughout the Northeast, will be back with another great presenter for you. Steve Ditmore will be with us, and he is going to be here discussing his upcoming book, Jim Gilliam, The Forgotten Dodger. The link to sign up for that is available in the SABR events calendar. And finally, if you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you are a baseball fan watching this, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Aaron Fischman, you're fantastic. Thanks for coming out and doing this for us.
Thank you so much. I want to apologize too for the technical issues. Thank you so much for the help and for bearing
I'm going to yell at you now. Stop it.
Okay, I won't apologize, but it's just so good, the level of participation, and I appreciate everyone's comments on the side too. I was so hyper focused on just the presentation, but a lot of really good answers to some of the questions in there. Just more colors, some good links, just stuff about the salaries and the roster size, which I knew and forgot. But yeah, so this was just such a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we thank you very much. So we're going to get everybody out of here. We'll see everybody Wednesday night. Thanks for coming out. Have a good night, everybody.